Hello and welcome to this brief overview of the multi-trade estimating system. We're just going to take a quick look at the system. We'll set up a new estimate, put some sections in, add some components to those sections, and then go and mark them up and pull off some reports. So if we start off, select File New, gives us a form to set up our new estimate. If we've also have the planned takeoff program that we provide, we can import the details from there. Otherwise, we can set up the header either using the auto estimate numbering, or we can take that off and just type in any description we want. We can set a started and required date, and if there's more than one person estimating, we can put the estimator in there. Then we can enter the client and site details. We can either type them out there, or if we have a pre-populated customer list, we can look that up, and I've only got one customer in there, so I'll select that one just to save a little bit of time. If we had typed this out, then clicking the plus button there will add it to the client database. Sites are exactly the same. Either type them out or select them from a pre-existing site contact database. Then we can edit or enter any notes we wish for the estimate. We can pop those in there. And then if I click Insert, we've now set up a new estimate. So once we've set up the estimate, the next thing we want to do is to put some sections in for the job. And sections can be however you wish to describe them. They could be house type A, house type B. They could be room descriptions or disciplines such as electrical, mechanical, construction. Once you've set the sections up, you can go into any of the takeoff sheets and build up the estimate, add any preliminary cost, provisional sums and contingencies you want, then edit or add the markup and pull off any reports you need. So to add a new section, we just select the Insert button and we can enter a description in there or select one from a drop-down list. As I say, any description can be anything you want, so it could be groundworks and drainage. You set up the quantity that you require there, and if you want to adjust the labour default times for that section, you can put an adjustment in at this stage, or you can come back and do it later. Now there are two types of sections you can create. One is the takeoff list, which is where you will do your takeoff and add materials to the job, and the other is a group heading. So it might be that, for example, for a group heading you might have heating and ventilating, and then within that you might have a takeoff list for hot water, another for cold water, another for the boiler system, and so on. So what I would do at this stage, rather than create lots of sections, I'll save a little bit of time and I'll open up another estimate, and what I will do is just copy and paste some sections over. So if I go to File and select Open, I can select another estimate. I've only got one other in there, so if I call that up, see we now have estimate E1 in here, and within this one I have some sections. So we have it set up under ground floor utilities in this instance, and within that I have some disciplines. So I've got power, lighting, consumer unit, boiler system, heating system, cold water, hot water. Then we have one for the first floor. Then we've got the building construction, so brick and block work, roofing, kitchen, studwork, partitioning, groundworks. We've got some subsections within groundwork. So you set it up however you want. It really, the main thing which will decide how you set these sections up is that you will, or you can, I should say, produce a selling price for any individual section or subsection. So you're probably going to set it up in a way that's best for your individual client. So on the right of the screen here, within the sections, you can see for the ground floor utilities there, we have a quantity, a cost, a total cost if there was more than one. We've only got one in these, so that will be the same. Similar for the time, we have individual section time and a total if there are multiple quantities. And if we adjust any of the section times, we'll have an adjustment factor there. And as we complete them, we can mark them as completed if we wish. Within the headers, you can see the subsections within them, along with their costs. So what I will do is copy them over. When you copy and paste, you can copy anything from individual items within a section, or you can select an individual section, just copy that one. You can select a header and then select to copy all the sections within that header, or we can select all the sections, which is what I do in this case. If I just select copy sections, and then I can go over to our other estimate. And what I can do, if I wish, is tile those so I can see both jobs. We got the sample estimate I've set up there, and the other one I opened afterwards there. And see if I just go and paste the section headers in there, and that's pasted all the sections in, and I can open up the nodes and take a look at them if I want. So having copied those across, then I'll close that one down and just maximize the screen for the one we're working on, our sample estimate. It's quite a useful facility to copy and paste. You can also do a clone entire estimate by doing a save as, so you can save an estimate under a new name. So the more you work on a system, the bigger your libraries get and the faster your work will be to produce your tenders. So what we really want to do at this stage, we've got some sections in there, is just go in. If I just go and show you can build them up. So if I go into the first section here, we've got a few items within this section already. So each item in the database will have a range that you can set it against. It'll have an item code and a description, and then as you add them on, it will put in the quantity, unit of measure, the cost for the individual item, and the fitting time for the item. As you add items, you can put them into markup groups and also into, that's both for labor and for material. So I'll cover in a little more detail as we add items. We can also put them against different fixes, so we can pull the materials out later by first phase, second phase, and so on. And then we have a total cost and the total time for the item. So as we add items onto the takeoff, they'll be added to the top half of the form. The bottom half of the form is where we would search for items. So we can search for individual products or assemblies and kits, and I'll just cover both of those briefly now. So if we just want to take a look at the database, we just click search. It will just bring all the items up in the database, or if there are quite a lot in there, we can either put in a range in there, so perhaps cables, and I'll bring up any cables. I've just got a couple in here for a sample, or we could put the item code in there. In this case, if I wanted 2.5 cable, then I'd put in T 2.5. And the other way you can locate items is by using part of the description, popping that in there, and then searching on the description. So lots of ways to find items which are in the database. So it's either by the range, by the description, or by the code. So if I just select a bit of twin and earth here, if I just double click, call that up and it's now asking for a quantity, so I can put a quantity in there, say 225, and this is being measured in meters, but it could be in yards or however you want to measure them. It's up to yourself as you add the items into the database, which we'll cover in a second. We then have a labour time for the item. I'm working in decimal minutes, but it's going to show me the analog option if I just move the cursor over it. And then the material cost, in this case per meter. And then we have a few other fields which I'll cover, and these are the the length and the width. So if we were calculating a square area, then we could put the length and width in there and it will give us the quantity automatically. And if we were measuring a cubic area, then we could also add a depth to that, which will give us the quantity. Now if we edit the time in here and we don't tick this, it would just alter the item for a degree of difficulty on this input line. But if we tick the box here, it will update it on the database, so next time we pick up the item it will have a new time on there, a new default time I should say. Then with this piece of material, it's been allocated to an apprentice. You can set up different skill types, and depending on which skill type you have for the material, it will apply a different rate and a different markup. So if I just show you those, if I open those up, you can add more if you want. You're obviously going to build these up to suit yourself, so just click the plus if you want to put a new one in. But I've just got a few in here for a sample. I have an apprentice with his hourly rate and the markup I want to apply: bricklayer, carpenter, electrical engineer, general labourer, heating engineer, and so on. So we can change it just by double clicking the item if we want, or if we've already got it in there, what we'd probably be doing is just selecting from a drop down list. But I'll leave this as the apprentice. Same applies for material cost. If we want to update the cost, we can, and if we want to update it on the database for next time, then we can tick that box there. Material markup, I'm putting this one in as general electrical material, but again we can have different markup groups, so we have different material types to different markups. And as I say, you can put it into a different fix or phase. So cable will have in our first fix, but if it was say a face plate, you might have that in as a second fix item. And then when you're doing your material list, you can pull out by the different fixes. So if we're happy with that, we can insert it, and that will add it onto the job. So we've now got 225 meters in this case. There's the individual cost and time, shows the markup group, labour markup, and the total cost. If we want to edit any of these, we can just by selecting them afterwards. So if we've added it, it's never too late to alter the cost. We can alter the cost or the time or the other fields, and if I select these, you'll get a more friendly description for the groups. Obviously I can alter those if I want, so if I want to make them wider I can. So lots of options for editing. So that's just adding an individual piece of material from the database. The other thing we can add are kits and assemblies, which is the way you're probably going to work. It's a lot faster, a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. Different types of assemblies and kits. If I select, say, a 2-gang 2A switch, or even a switch socket as we're in the power, then you can see against that 2-gang switch socket, I've got the faceplate there, the back box, a couple of wall plugs, and a couple of screws. I can edit any quantities I want before adding it on. I can edit any times I want before adding it on. I can also add them after I've added them, obviously. So all I need to do is to enter the quantity. So if I want 18 of them to go on the job now, then if I click the insert, then you can see there's our switch socket, 18 of them. Same for the boxes, and 36 of the plugs and screws, and it tells us that we've added them into the 2-gang switch socket group, which I will come to in a second. But I just want to show you another type of assembly you can use, which is a linear assembly. So if you have linear runs or things, you can also put those into kits. So get some 2.5 cabling along with the mini trunking. So what I'm saying here is for every meter, in this case of mini trunking, I've got a meter of cable, a couple of screws and a couple of plugs. And then if we want to add those onto the job, we can. And on to the job they go. You can see again we've got the group description there. One thing you can do with the assemblies and the kits is zero these quantities, and if you zero them, then it won't add that particular item to the takeoff. That can be quite useful where you might have a group of items where you're not sure which component you're going to use until this stage, and then you can just zero the item that you don't want, and it'll only add the ones with quantities on. Okay, so it's fairly easy to add items on. The groups I said I'd cover in a second, so I'll cover those now. What we have here are we're displaying the individual items of those groups, as you can see above. If we want, we can just show the groups. So if I click groups, then you can see where I added that mini trunk in there. I added 15 meters of them, and now we have the cost for all the components together and the time for all the components together, and the extended cost and time for 15 of them. And same for those switch sockets I put in. It tells you they're in a group. Where we put something which wasn't in a group, such as the cabling before that, then that just it's marked as not being in the group there. Okay, so we have assemblies, we have products. What about items which aren't on the database? Because obviously you're going to want to build your database up to suit your own requirements. What we need to do is select new item. If I select new item, we have an empty form where we can put in the quantity, we can give it a code, description, time, cost, say which market group we want to go into, and if you don't put one, it will just drop it into a default of general labour and general materials. And then we can put in the type of measure and the phase we might be using it for, a range, and the supplier, and a couple of items which I'll cover in a second. So if I just populate this a second, so if I want to pick something up, say an uninterruptible power supply, just to give it a little bit of a code. And then if I leave this ticked, it will add it to the database. So next time I need it, it will be on the database for us. If I'm never likely to use it again, we can untick that and then it won't add it to the database. So if I give it a description here, right, so if I just give it a description there, I could put a time to fit it there, and I'll just give it a cost. As I say, we can alter the group if we want, or I can just leave it as general labour and general materials. unit of measure is each, but obviously if it was per meter or yard, per foot, whatever, we can alter that. We can set it for a fix and phase if we want. You can also put them into ranges, and if you put it into a range, it makes it easier to find later on. So we can either select a range or create a new one if we want. I'll just leave this one in the specials, I think. And if we want, we can put a supplier for it. And then I sort of cover these down the bottom. So this one I'm putting in as a supply and install item. If it was a labour only item or a supply only item, then we could mark it as such. Because one feature the program has is if you've anything which isn't given a cost or a quantity or a labour time, then it will flag it up for you. There's an option to have a filter before you go into the markup or reporting, before you make a commercial decision. So if it is only a labour only or material only item, you'd want to mark it as that, so it doesn't flag as a false negative. So it's very easy to add items onto the system. That's all we need to do. Just leave that checked, and you need to fill out the fields that you want. So if I select that, that's now added it both to the takeoff there, and also put it in the database so we can use it again when we need it. The assemblies that we built up there, they're just as easy to build. Instead of selecting new item, you just select new kit, and at that stage you'd just be asked to give it a description, a quantity that you want to add to the takeoff at this point in time, and the unit of measure of that assembly, and then you would just pick up the items or build them as you want, as we just did there. And though each item will now go into the new kit until you click the end build button, which will illuminate if we'd put one in there. And it's as simple as that to build the assembly. So it's very quick to build up the database and extend it. And the benefit of doing it this way is you don't end up starting off with a system which has a load of rubbish in that you won't need and never likely to use. You'll only have products you need, you want, with your times and costs in. Okay, so once we've finished our takeoff, if we're happy with that, then we can move on. There's lots of editing we can do, individual items, or say copy and pasting as we did earlier. You can edit sections, alter costs, search and replace for items. You can even do search and replace for alternative parts. So if you had one manufacturer's, in this case, a switch socket, you can switch it for a different manufacturer's. That facility is within the system. But if we're happy with the takeoff for now, we can move on. So I'll just show you some add-in preliminary costs. Okay, so if I select insert, then we can give it a description. So can be whatever you want. So if we've got some tower going on there, we can put it in as a percentage or a cost. So if I need to hire some tower, and I put a cost of 500 in there, we then got an option to spread it over labour, material, or all. And the reason we have that there is any cost we add in as a prelim, it will split proportionately across your schedule of rates. So your customer won't see it. It splits the cost proportionately across those unit rates. Now we can add that cost to all the sections in there, or we can go through and select a section, and I'm just going to add that in the lighting section because we've got it in there just for when we're working off the lighting. And I'll also add that to just the labour element, so it's only going to spread that cost across the labour element of the unit rates. So we click insert, it adds it onto the job. To show you another example, overheads, for instance, if we wanted to, we could put in a percentage, and I'll put that over all elements, all sections. So there we've got our overheads added at 10%. And then provisional sums, contingencies, just give it a description. I'm just going to type in P sums in there, and I'll add a couple of thousand. You can set it against a section if you want, or just over the whole job. Just put in as many as you need, wherever you need, and then we can move on and carry out our markup. So if I select markup, okay, so we've got all our sections down the side here, and then you can see the costs for all of those sections and those headers down the bottom here. So we have, for instance, against all sections, we've got the material cost, the material markup, total material, labour time, cost, labour markup, total labour, total markup, average percentage, and the total cost there, and the gross selling price. Right, so the screen above it. Okay, we're looking at all sections here, and it's really the two areas to the screen. The one area in blue is all our labour elements. So in here we have an apprentice, bricklayer, carpenter, electrical engineer, general labourer, heating engineer, another labourer, plasterer, roofer, and so on. Depends how many disciplines you put in there. It has their hours that they're working, their hourly rate, which then gives you the cost for those skills, and our default markup rate then shows the profit against each of them, and the total selling price and the gross profit. Same for our material, which are in green here. So these are the markup groups that I was talking to or mentioned earlier. We've got the labour markup groups and now the material markup groups. You can put as many in as you want. If you don't want any, just leave them as general materials and general labour, and that's fine. That'll work just as well. But you can set them up into different groups, put your materials against different groups, as I say, and then you get a cost for each group, and you can apply, as you can see here, a different markup against a different labour type, also different material types in this case. So we've got 20% against general material, 40% against electrical, 5% against lighting, and then so on down there. At the bottom of that, we then have our subtotals for all of those. Those preliminary costs that we put in a moment ago, it's showing the total for those in there. And if we have a main contractor's discount we need to put in, we can put the percentage in there. So I've got my 1/39th in there. It gives us the cost, and then there's our provisional sums that we added a moment ago in there. So they are £2,000, and then that's the total for the job there. So we can look at the sections now and look at the overall cost of the job, and if we want, we can start fine-tuning it. As I say, the estimate will pick up your defaults, but you can edit those at this stage. So if you need to edit those rates, you can. So if I were to put in a different rate, say for the carpenter, then I can and adjust them. Similar for the markup percentage, if I want to put the bricklayer's profit margin up to 45%, then I can. Or the other thing I can do is just put in the profit, which will work the percentage back for us. If I want £800 thereabouts in there, and that will mark the percentage back for us, so we can put in either the profit we want for any of these, and that works equally as well on any of the materials. So we can alter, if we wanted put the lighting up to 15% and so on. So we can just play about with this, fine tune it until we're happy. And the other thing you can do is just put in the total you want for the selling price in there, and that will work everything backwards and alter all the markups for the various disciplines in there. So you can sit here and just fine tune it until you're happy. Everything we have done on this screen here, we can do against any of the individual sections. So I can select the power section that we're working on, and then it's obviously we've got less skill types in there and less material types, but I can then go in and fine tune any of the labor or the material just against that section if I want, and it'll update the section totals there. Same for the boiler system or for any of the others. So I go back to the overall, got the overall totals there. So you can fine tune it as much as you want. The other way we can do the labour is to use the gang rates. There is a separate video on the website if you want to take a look at that. But essentially with the gang rates, that's working a slightly different method with your labour. You'll have your total labour time for the job, which in this case is 914 hours. And then you can select from all your different skill levels, and if you know you've only got a month to complete the job, you're going to be able to pay them time and a half, maybe double time. You might have to get subcontractors in, you might have to pay travel allowances, overnight stops, and so on, and all that can be factored in to the gang rates matrix, and it will calculate an hourly rate that it will cost you to put those particular skill levels on the job to get it completed within that time scale. But I say there's a totally separate video on the website that you can look at if you prefer to work that way, but tends to be mainly for the large jobs. Okay, so if we're happy with the markup, we can then go and look at our reports. I'll just show you these two tabs first before I go to there. The letter, the estimating system can hold a default letter, which it pulls up for you. You can copy and paste a letter in here or just edit your default at this stage if you want. And the letter is used on the quotation report. Then we have data sheets. So data sheets, if you want to go off and find some data sheets, you can just go and add those on now, and it will attach any data sheets you add in here to the quotation report. Or if you've already have a pre-existing list of data files that you use frequently, such as a health and safety one, we can select it and just add it on now. And that will add that health and safety sheet to our quotation report. So if I move on to the report screen, and you see the reports are broken into three distinct sections. We have presentation reports, then we have a material list reports, and management reports. Management reports are essentially everything you can see on the screens. You can get printouts of them if you need. And then we have material lists, which will produce consolidated material lists for you with or without costs, by supply if you wish. So if I just run one of those off, when you select a report, you can show it on screen, send it to the printer, or file if you want, or email it off. If you're going to send it or produce a file for it, I should say, then you've got different formats you can produce it in: PDF, CSV, so it can be opened by any spreadsheet, rich text file, so it can be opened by a word processor, and HTML if you ever found a need for that one. So if I want to pull off a material list, then we just take a quick look at that. You can see that we've a material list here, and it's grouped by the ranges. So specials included in that UPS I added, you can see they're in there. The quantities, the unit cost there, and a description of what the unit is, and the extended total where there's more than one. So again, for the range, I've got a Meissen radiator range there and a cable range there. So it's grouping them for us and giving subtotals for each group. But obviously, if you're sending this off to a wholesaler, you'll probably just give them a quantified list with no costs on there. Just mentioning that if you are sending off to a wholesaler, you can also, from the section form, you can send a CSV file to them, so they can just put the price of materials against a file for you, and then you can re-import it into the estimating system to save you having to update them. Right, so the first thing we probably want to do at this stage is to send off a quotation. So we can send out reports off at 2 or 3 decimal places. Choice is up to yourself. So anyway, I'll start off with the quotation report here. So if I show that one on screen, first thing we have is our letter, our covering letter. So it's saying who it's to, dated it for us, and then we've got Dear Rocky. There are 2 options on the quotation letter, informal or formal. This was obviously informal. If we'd selected formal, then it would be saying Dear Mr. Slater. There is an option to scan in your signature, which it will then add to this report for you. You can, if you wish, also scan in your letterheads, and then it will add your letterhead to your presentation report. So if you had your letterhead in there, it will be showing your letterhead on this here. So after the covering letter comes the quotation itself. So is the selling price for each section on the job. So we've got the group headers in here. So we've got a selling price for the group header, and then the individual sections within those, and then the overall job at the bottom. It's showing the prelims there and the total selling price. Sorry, I'll correct myself there. It's showing the provisional sums there, I should say, sorry. It's not showing any prelims. Those are all buried in the rates, as I mentioned earlier. So if you send your quotation off and they say, yep, that looks pretty good, can we have a schedule of rates, please? Then you have lots of options at this stage on the types of schedules of rates that you want to show them. You probably want to start off showing them as little detail as possible, which will be your assembly rates. So if I just pull one of those up just to show you. So list of assembly rates. Again, presentation report can be overlaid with your letterhead if you wish. But if I just show you this first rate here, we have a 1-gang switch socket there, and there's a quantity of 4 of them, the selling price for 1 and the extended quantity for 4. Now that's the schedule of assembly rates. If they ask for a little more detail, then you can show them the schedule of unit rates. And if we go straight to that item again, you can see this time it's showing all the various components we have for that switch socket. So it's showing the faceplate there, 4 of them, cost each, the extended cost, the back box cost, the wall plugs, and even the screws. So it gives a complete breakdown of all the unit items within that assembly. And then there is a stage you can go with that. If you ever have clients that ask you to split that into labor and material elements, then again, if we look at that first switch socket there, you can see we've got 4 of them there, and there's the unit cost for the material element and the unit cost for the labour element and the extended total for both there. So you can break it down as much as you need. It just depends how much detail you want to show them. So say with all the reports, you can either show them on screen, print them off, send them to a file, or email them away. I've mentioned on the quotation report, but I didn't actually show you. If you're doing the quotation report, then you can show it informal or formal. So if I'd selected that, it would be saying Dear Mr. Slater rather than Dear Rocky on that covering letter which I produced. And if you want to attach an overlay to your reports, your presentation reports, then we just go into overlay, scan in your letterhead, save it as a JPEG, just browse to where it's kept, and then that will select it there, and then we'd click show overlay image there, and that will then add the letterhead to our presentation reports. So that's just a quick overview of the multi-trade estimating program. Thank you very much for your time.